Well, countdown is very much on now to Ireland-France 2:15 this Saturday in Dublin. Teams have been named. Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent is once again in studio. Hello.
Hello, Joe.
This is how you know it's a big game. Graced with the presents. Oh my God, in 3D. He's even more handsome. Ian Madigan, hello. Good to have you in.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, great to be in. It is a big game.
Is that why you're in? Did you say, I'm round 4, I'm going to go in? Did you circle it in the calendar?
I think it's worthwhile coming in for this one. I don't think it's going to disappoint. There's been a lot said in the build-up, and I think we're going to be dealt an absolute cracker come Saturday.
Won't disappoint, Cian.
Who, myself and Ian, or the game? So
everything.
A lot of pressure now that Mads is in studio as well, so I'm sure he'll deliver.
But Saturday also won't disappoint, it would seem.
Yeah, look, I mean, from the outset, this was the one that was built as the big one. I think in France they were calling it as much from early in the week, just looking at the French press. And yeah, like the France-Ireland games have delivered over the last few years. I know Marseille last year was a little bit different with Paul Willems's first half red card. You'd no Dupont, no Ntamack, but as an occasion, it was incredible. And obviously the game 2 years ago, I think still stands alone as one of the best games of the Six Nations in the last probably decade, really. It was incredible, and obviously Ireland won both of those, and France had won the previous 3, I think. So I suppose the balance has started tipped in Ireland's favour, but this weekend feels like a different kettle of fish.
Yeah, well, it's interesting the way it's tended to go. Ireland 2 in a row, before that France 3 in a row, before that Ireland 3 in a row. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm no John Nash, but that means we're due one. Our rugby coverage in Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. Energia sponsors rugby in Ireland at all levels. At grassroots, there is the Energia AAL, of course. They are energy partner to Leinster, Connacht, the Irish men's and women's teams, and their Rugby for All initiative supports inclusion, welcoming everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. And to learn more about Energy's rugby partnerships, you can also find out about their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans. Energia.ie/rugby is the place to go. Teams named. Well, this is interesting on both fronts. So Mac Hansen has a quad injury. Ronan Kelleher is out with a neck injury, and Tadhg Furlong didn't quite make it. I think maybe a little bit expected, which means Hugo Keenan at 15, of course. Jamie Osborne, his first ever professional start on the right wing. In he goes. Robbie Henshaw's at 13, Bundyaki 12, and James Lowe on the left wing. Prendergast and Gibson Park. And then it's Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan, Finlay Beelum wins his 50th cap. And then second row, we were wondering, Tadhg Byrne in, Joe McCarthy in. And then it's Peter O'Mahony at 6, Josh van der Fleer 7, Caelan Doris 8, and a 6-2 on the bench. Rob Herring, given the Kelleher injury, his first outing of the championship. Cian Healy and Thomas Clarkson. And the forwards are made up of James Ryan, Jack Conan and Ryan Baird. Conor Murray and Jack Crowley will cover from the bench. Do we like?
Yeah, look, we've a couple of injuries, which is going to change things slightly. I do like the fact that we've gone 6-2. It was predicted the French were going to go 7-1. I think we've got to match that French power, and we certainly have that on the bench. Delighted to see Joe McCarthy starting. I thought he made a big impact for us last week. Big challenge for Osborne on the wing. A couple of goals there for Leinster. Not that they've gone badly, but they haven't gone amazingly well. And it is a big transition going from fullback to the wing.
Well, I remember you were on commentary for Leinster away to La Rochelle. And there were a couple of moments where you said he was either not quick enough off the mark or too quick off the mark. And they're just the split-second decisions that are in a slightly unusual position too that are hard to make.
Yeah, and look, that was a high-level club game. This is going to be another level above. And you're dealing with the best athletes in the world, and you're also dealing with the best tacticians in the world. And you're playing against Dupont, who is the best 9 in the world and has the ability to manipulate wingers like no other 9. So for Osborne, that's where, as a winger, it's crucial that you trust your instincts, but your instincts will only get sharper the more game time that you get. And he is coming in somewhat from the cold.
So has he been picked to allow Ireland to go with the 6-2? As in Calvin Nash, more experience, played Marseille, of course, last year, but we're a little bit short if certain injuries happen. Therefore, Osborne's versatility trumps Nash's experience at wing?
I think there's a big element of that. Now, Nash did go off injured for Munster last week at half time, so I'm sure that didn't help his case. But my understanding is that Nash was available for selection this week. So I'd say if you're Calvin Nash, you're feeling pretty sore that Mac Hansen is out injured, that you were the starting right winger in last season's competition when they won it. So that's a tough pill to swallow, I think, for Calvin Nash. But I think you're right, Joe. The fact that Ireland have gone with the 6-2 and they have Osborne, like, he'll cover centre, he'll cover fullback, he'll cover the wing. But I mean, the guy's only 23. Like, the amount of things that he's been asked to do, I'd say, behind the scenes as a guy trying to find his feet at Test rugby, trying to cover multiple positions, I'd say it's very, very tricky. You touched on the La Rochelle game there. He started 4 games, professional games, on the wing. I know he's played fullback and he was excellent in South Africa, but I get the sense that he's going to be a centre, I have to admit, long term. But one of those starts in the wing was against Bath for Leinster in the Champions Cup. And Bath scored 3 tries, and 2 of those 3 tries came down Jamie Osborne's wing. Particularly the third one, I think he got caught out a little bit when Ollie Lawrence went around him. So they're the kind of things I think that France will be looking at. Ian hit the nail on the head. I think that they're top level European club games, but this is another level altogether when you think of Ntamack, Dupont, and how clever they are around the fringes. So I think it's a calculated gamble, I have to admit. I actually think it has Andy Farrell's fingerprints all over it, because not many of us saw Jamie Osborne getting the nod at fullback in South Africa when Hugo Keenan was away with the Sevens. But I wonder, what do you think, Ian? Do you think they'll kind of interchange maybe throughout the game, that, Hugo might cover? I know you've actually been saying that Hugo on the wing might have been worth a look, so I wonder, will they sort of maybe filter in and out of kind of fullback and wing?
Yeah, I think the back three is going to have to be dynamic against France. You look at their long kicking game. It means that the Irish back three are going to have to sit deep. It also means, with the speed that France have and how they attack with numbers and get their fast guys back together, you need to play your wingers high. The positives with Osborne, he's very good early, and he's going to be coming up against Biel Barry, who can be targeted early.
Big time.
But the negative with it is Biel Barry is probably the fastest winger in the world at the moment.
How's Osborne for speed?
He's certainly not slow, right? But he is not winger quick. Like, if you were to race himself and Biel Barry over 50 metres, I'd imagine Biel probably wins by about 5 metres. This guy eats up ground like I've never seen before. But the interchanging of the back three, I think, and that ties into Ireland's kick strategy as well, which I know we're going to kind of dive into deeper. But I think we will see a fluidity between Keenan and Osborne. But there's also a big play there in protecting James Lowe. Lowe's been our best player so far in the Six Nations. He's made the most metres for us. He's been the most impactful with his carries, and a key part of that is keeping him fresh. We do not need him doing shuttle runs in the backfield and going up and down like a wing back. And that's where the balance between Hugo and Osborne is really important in keeping him fresh on the ball. And
so, to round off this question mark, this calculated gamble, in so much as it's a gamble on Osborne, you think it's worth that gamble to have the 6-2? You think the 6 is important against this French 7-1, this power? Yeah,
and look, we're covered with Crowley as well. That makes a big difference. He's a guy he's comfortable playing in the centre. He can play full back. Hugo can play on the wing.
So we're unlikely to have Gibson Park on the wing for 30 minutes, as happened in Twickenham.
Less likely, but not unthinkable.
Yeah.
And both of Jack Crowley's last 2 appearances have come at fullback as well, which, look, I know Mac Hansen, I think, pulled up a cramp in Cardiff a couple of weeks ago, but it's no harm that Crowley has had. I know from his point of view, he absolutely would want to be getting those minutes at 10, but from an Irish context, I think it'll actually benefit, particularly when you go with the 6-2. But just to pick up on your point about, I don't think there's any wingers, to be honest, in the Six Nations who would be as fast as B.A. Barry. But I think early, even before we found out today that Mac Hansen was ruled out, I think early that's going to be a big target for Ireland. You think back to Tommy Freeman's try for England against France. I was watching that game back during the week, and it reminded me of the World Cup quarter final when South Africa just went after him big time. Manny Libok was raining balls down on top, and Pollard came on and did the same thing
and had a lot of joy.
Both of the Springboks' first two tries came down that left wing. And then if you think back to the first game in Marseille, France dropped him. And I think that was largely because he just wasn't able to deal with the high ball. So I would be shocked if that's not an area, when you look at how well Sam Prendergast, Gibson Park have been kicking. Look at James Lowe's try in Cardiff the last time out. I know Ireland have had Brian Fenton in camp, and they've actually put a lot of stock in that in terms of what he's sort of told them about high ball stuff. So I thought that was going to be a big focus for Ireland this week, even if Mack Hansen was playing. And I think even more so now that Jamie Osborne is playing, I think that's going to be a big target for them.
Okay, they'll lean into it. So the French team, as expected, Ntamack is back from suspension. Damien Penaud is back from punishment of sorts. And they've gone 7-1. I mean, it was interesting. With the Italian game, they went 7-1. We were asking, so Luku is their cover on the bench, we should say, and the team is, I mean, it's frighteningly good. Ramos at 15, Penaud, Barassi and Mofana in centres, Biliburi, Ntamack, Dupont, and then it's Gross, Makovaka, Antonio, Flaman and Guillard. He was very good against Italy. Cross, Boudinent and Aldrit. I'm reading this more than having seen this with my own eyes or remembered it, but apparently Boudinent, flanker, can also play a bit in centre. He's done it for La Rochelle at the odd time. Luku is their main cover across the back line, and as we know, Dupont can move around, although I think when you're the opposition and Dupont moves away from 9, you're quite happy for that to happen. But after the Italy game, I think you were in studio and I was like, will they do 7-1 against Ireland? And the general feeling in the panel was, no, be madness.
Yeah, I personally don't see the risk reward there. I don't see the reward side of it. We saw in the Scotland game that head clash and suddenly it was game over really off the back of that. Now France have more weapons in their armoury than Scotland do, and possibly maybe could have hung in there. But it's quite French. They spoke about it publicly. They thought that maybe it has changed how Ireland would select their team, and I think they've made it really clear. They've set their stall out. Galthie is under massive pressure. France lose this game, I think his job is finished with France. You look back at the World Cup, while they played some great rugby, they got knocked out in the quarter final, and they did some really silly things against South Africa. They were exposed. You look at the game 2 years ago, while it was a brilliant game, it ended up being a slugfest. France found out that they weren't fit enough. The game last year, where obviously Dupont was unavailable, as Cian's touched on, and they get the red card. But it was a big blot on the copybook, the poor performance against England. The patience has run out in France, and it's only a win, and only a Six Nations Championship win saves him. So he's just set his stall out. He did it against Italy. He's gone 7-1. He's gone to the power game. He's going with the strengths of Dupont, get him on the front foot, and he's happy to bow out doing it his way.
And do you think it's a good call, or if you were in the coaching ticket and he said, Ian, I'm thinking 7-1, would you have tried to talk him out of it?
I certainly would have tried to talk him out of it. I just think there's too many things in a game of rugby that are outside of your control, and hedging that with a 7-1 versus a 6-2, I just don't see the upside.
Even you think there's so many examples of the 6-2, I know that's obviously not as extreme as the 7-1 backfiring. As you mentioned, the Scotland game a couple of weeks ago, the Ireland A game a couple of weeks ago after the Cardiff game in the Six Nations. It was a disaster for the Ireland A team. And even go back to the Champions Cup semi-final in the Aviva, Leinster-Toulouse, when it backfired then as well, and Ugo Molla moved Dupont from scrum half and he ended up playing 10 and Leinster ran riot. So look, the idea of moving Dupont, and look, we all know that he's a wonderful player and he can play 10 and you could probably put him in any position and he'd do a job for you, but the idea of moving the best player in the world from his best position, I don't know, I think there's an element of arrogance almost to it, and it doesn't sit well with me at all. I couldn't agree with you more, Ian, in that the risk here for the reward, and even when you look at the quality of the 7 forwards that they have on the bench, to me, not as good as the Springbok 7 forwards when they were using it at the World Cup. So look, if you want to be sort of like a traditionalist about it, France are the country that we all sort of grew up watching, in the French backs and the flair, and to think that they have one scrum half on the bench now is it's a sad way to see, I think, rugby is going. It's been more holistic kind of view of it when you look at the quality of French backs that aren't getting a look. And so, look, if it pays off for Galthie, then I think you're right. Like, he will save his job. But I think from an Irish context, the big thing is to try and run France around the place, because they know what's coming in the second half. And I think Ireland really have to back their fitness.
Okay, that's teams. We'll get into some specifics in the game. Before that, though, a question I asked is kind of a big picture question on just this rivalry, which has become the de facto rivalry in the championship. I asked Eddie O'Sullivan on Tuesday's chat or Monday's chat. So the 2000s, obviously, it was night and day. France were exceptional. Ireland were still trying to really get things going, and they won, I think, 4 championships in 6 years, 2 Grand Slams in there. Ireland, it was like laps of honour, triple crowns, eventually culminating in 2009. 2010s, they lost their way, and Ireland really kicked on under Schmidt. So the 2020s, as things stand, this key rivalry now, the rivalry in the Six Nations, in terms of head-to-head matches in the 20s, it's 3-2 in France's favour. In terms of championships won, it's 2-1 in Ireland's favour. And they both had heartbreak at a World Cup quarter-final. God, they could have really won, kind of a situation. So I asked Eddie, in your heart of hearts, though, mixing all that together, who's the better team? Of the 2020s thus far, halfway through, who's the better team?
I think for what France have had at their disposal, they've massively underperformed. And if you were to ask me as an out half, which team do you want to slot into at the weekend to give yourself the best chance of winning, I'd pick the French team. You know, look, you've got 28 teams, or I think it's 20, maybe 30 professional teams in France, 14 in the top 14, obviously in full professional league in the Pro D2. Ireland has 4 professional teams. We have a population of 4 million. You know, I think France is like 60 million. And just how athletically gifted they are. You look at the success Toulouse have had, La Rochelle have had. That hasn't been that consistency of French teams dominating the Champions Cup. We haven't seen that in the Six Nations. They are the team that is under pressure tomorrow. And that can work both in our favour and against us. This French team are hungry for success, and they know that they've underperformed, and they're coming here with a point to prove.
Cian, who's the best team of the 2020 Six Nations?
I agree with Ian that they've massively underachieved, and you touched on the sort of the World Cup disappointment, and I was at both quarterfinals, like probably the best 2 days of rugby I think certainly I've ever seen. It was incredible, but I was shocked Galthie survived after that, because the amount that French rugby as a whole, in terms of getting the clubs to buy into the Project 2023 home World Cup, look, it was a really tight game that they lost to the Box, but I was very surprised that he survived after that. And then to deliver such a poor performance in Marseille, the first game after that, really heaped the pressure on them even more. So all the pressure, I think, is on France, even allowing for the fact that there is a shot of history on the line for Ireland. But I think you'd have to say Ireland have been the better team, because the proof is in the pudding. Look at what they've done. You also look at Ireland will say it winning a series in New Zealand in 2022. France have taken a different approach over the last few years. A lot of that was down to trying to blood more players for the 2023 World Cup, but they haven't tended to send their big guns on big tours. They've been using them as development tours. And like Ian has said, this is a golden generation of French players. Like, look at the success that they've had at under 20s level as well. And they won the title in 2022, but that's not good enough for a team with the resources at Galthie's disposal.
I think we'd all accept they've underperformed, but it's not mutually exclusive. You could have underperformed and still be the best team of Six Nations in the 20s. Like, were you angling towards, therefore, Ireland have been the team of this rivalry so far, or have France, even though they've underperformed?
No, Ireland have been.
Ireland have been.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But I think the perception of this French team in this current competition has been, clouded by the performance against England. Like, this French team is playing well. Like, they absolutely demolished the Italians. They beat up Wales significantly, and in second or third gear, they took the foot off the gas for the last 30 minutes. If they had to win that game by 60 or 70 points, they would have.
Because in my heart of hearts, I feel France are the better team.
I knew you were angling towards.
I really do.
Les Bleus.
I know. I just think in 15 years' time, that Galthie back in the 2020s when we were all young men.
But will they have the silverware to show for it? And if Ireland win 3 Six Nations in a row, become the first team to do it, for me, that stands alone.
I agree. So therefore, for me, what's at stake is if France win this and then that's 4-2 ahead on head-to-heads and they're 2-2 for championships, I think France can say, you arrogant Irish stop. We're obviously the better team.
Yeah, in a way. But like you look at, have Leinster been the best team in Europe over the last 5 years?
Time for that one.
Well, but it's on Cian's point.
We open that can of worms.
No, but on Cian's point, like you need to get wins. You need to be lifting that trophy.
Fair enough.
But Ireland have done that.
That's what's at stake in a way. France win this game. They're double on head-to-heads and they're level on championships. So it's
they essentially win the championship. I know we still have next week, but there's so much. There's so much riding on this weekend. That's why
2 championships each.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why I'm so surprised that they've taken such a big risk by going 7-1. Because if they get a couple of injuries early on, then it's going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. Which could happen, like you said, Ian, because there are so many uncontrollables in rugby.
Yeah, you sent in a few things in you wanted to touch on. Fascinating stuff, and we'll try and keep up with you. is the point here. So. One to highlight, and as you put it in your message, Le Grubber. So you made the point France have had the most Grubber kicks in this competition. They've had 16, some with success, some not with success. But you made a really kind of interesting point. France like to kick deep, and therefore that puts manners on Ireland's back three. And equally, they'll take you through the phases, and you want to put them under pressure. So there's a nice big gap between Ireland's deep defence, their back three, and that front line of defence, and they are really trying to manipulate you so they can use that. Yeah, and tied in with the point we were talking about earlier, on what we spoke about last week about the speed edge that France have on Ireland. We and with Osborne coming in, we're not quicker than we would have been with Hansen. So you look at France's speed across the back line. Penaud, Bielbury, Ramos, Dupont, Ntamack, they're all fast guys. Some are particularly fast. What impact does that have? It's not just the one-on-one, being able to take your opposition number on the outside. That's the obvious one. It's the ability to realign, to find shape faster in attack. It's your ability to scramble in defence. Can you, if the opponents make a line break, can you scramble back, maybe chase them down, make a tackle, or for the next phase, can you get back into position? Speed helps that. You think back to the Jordan try from the World Cup. If we make that break, we don't finish it. And we also can't scramble. So that's a big part of it. Then kick chase. France kick long, and they like to. They've had the most kick meters in the competition. If you're trying to do a contestable kick as a 9 or a 10, and you kick it slightly too far, if you've got speed, you can make up that ground. You can still get up and contest, or in worst case scenario, you're tackling the opponent as he catches the ball. If you're 2-3 yards short of speed, you're not going to be able to make that tackle. The pass goes infield, it moves the point of contact. That has a big impact on the attack. And I think that the secret weapon at the weekend for the French is the Grubber kick. They've attempted, as you said, 16 Grubbers, not with loads of success. We've seen a bit of success with it, but because their long kicking game is so good, Dupont hammers the ball long, Ramos kicks the ball a mile, as does Ntamack. So Keenan is going to have to cover the backfield, and we're potentially going to have another winger back there covering the corner. So as a result of that, you're then put under pressure. Because there's fast guys running against you, you want to keep a strong front line. You can't play your wingers on a half where they're not in the front line but they're not covering the backfield. You have to try and show a positive picture in the front line, otherwise they'll run around you. Because the French pack are so powerful and they can generate that quick ball, and Dupont is coming in and moving the ball quickly, it doesn't look amazing, and it didn't against Italy, but it was devastating. They just get in, simple pass, 5 metre pass, 5 metre pass, 5 metre pass, and then they're into the kind of wider channels where there's lots of space to thread Grubber kicks through. Bit of footwork, drop the ball on the foot, and then it's a foot race. France overload one side when they do this. So you could have Bielbury, Penaud and Ramos all chasing. If you've got, for example, James Lowe turning or Osborne turning, it's a 3-on-1. It's a rugby ball, bounces funny ways. If you can do that 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a game, and you can come up with it 3 times, you're then attacking against an unstructured Irish defence on the front foot. The likelihood of those resulting in tries is very high. Is there any easy solution for Ireland defensively with that? That is where I see us the most exposed at the weekend, and
what doesn't help that exposure is Dupont and having to defend him. It means that you're tighter to the breakdown. You know, there's different options you can do there to try and prevent his running game, but those options that you can take to prevent his running game leave you more exposed on the edges.
You know, sometimes Murray seemed to do it a bit. He'd like step out of the defensive line and almost go behind it and just almost like a sweeper in football, just shadow the ball, waiting for that grubber through. Is that doable here, or do you really miss him in the defensive line?
Yeah, and like that's going to be part of Gibson Park's role.
In and out.
Yeah. You know, can he apply maximum line speed pressure, but can he also cover the chip space? Where he's going to also have to defend on the edge, as Ireland have used him multiple times in this competition. If he's defending on the edge, the ball goes the other side and the kick gets threaded through, he just simply can't be there. The other side to it as well is if you overwork your 9 or you try and be too cute in where you put him, if you do turn the ball over and he's completely out of position, you're missing out on those opportunities.
Yeah. To stay with France attack then, let's do it in that kind of a theme. It was interesting, Cian. L'Équipe, the headline during the week was Prendergast, Ireland's defensive weak link. He's missed 15 tackles, the most of any player in the championship. How big a weak link is he defensively?
I think it is an issue, and I think particularly for the better teams like France, who have big, powerful ball carriers, are going to be coming down his channel. Look, I think, obviously a lot has been made of Sam Prendergast, and some of it has been particularly poor. I think the try that Wales scored, their second one, I think it was, in Cardiff, he looked to be particularly caught. But he does put himself in the way of tackles. I think there's a bit of a myth around here that the guy doesn't want to be tackling. And I don't necessarily think that's fair at all, because I think back to the tackle he made in Murrayfield on Xander Fagerson, one of the biggest players on the pitch and allowed, but people might remember Peter O'Mahony made that brilliant poach. That came from Sam Prendergast tackling, however, 120 kg prop or whatever Xander Fagerson is. So it's not like he's not putting himself in the way, but it's definitely an issue. And I just don't think you can get away at test level with, trying to hide players, because I think Bundy Aki will be doing a lot of his heavy lifting as much as he can on his outside, and I think Josh van der Fleer will be doing a lot of it on his inside. But I just wanted to go back to Ian's point for a sec, Joe, about the grubber kick, because it's fascinating. It's something I've been thinking a lot about this week as well. And I was looking, France's low kick retention rate is 44%. So low kick, if we take that to mean grubber, that's the highest in the Six Nations. Ireland's is 27%. But if you flip that on its head, the high kick retention rate, Ireland's is at 21 and France is down at 8. So it probably goes back to the point I was making about Osborne, you're trying to use his height and his strength in the air. But I think Hugo Keenan is going to be really important to the point that you made, Ian, about covering in that backfield. I think in World Rugby at the moment, he's probably the best at it, maybe, almost playing one step ahead of the opposition in terms of his reading of the play. And I think Ireland really missed him actually in Cardiff. I think Jamie Osborne did fine, but I think the calmness that Hugo Keenan gives to everyone around him, particularly in the backfield. James Lowe speaks about it all the time, that he would not be half the player he is now without Hugo Keenan alongside him in the backfield. So I think that will be really important to defend those grubber kicks, because look, we speak a lot about Dupont and the kicking threat he has, but Roman Ntamack is a delight as well, and he has that triple threat as well in terms of kick, pass and run. So that's the danger with this French team and their attack, Joe. Obviously a huge amount of focus is going to be on Dupont, but think back to Ntamack's try in the top 14 final, was it last year, semi-final against La Rochelle, when he just opened up the game and scored an absolutely sensational try at the end. And he tends to fly under the radar because he's almost a facilitator for Dupont, and I think that's why obviously they play together week in, week out with Toulouse, but I think that's why France haven't looked as fluid when Jalibert has been in the team, because I think Jalibert wants to get on the ball more. He wants to make things happen, whereas I think Ntamack, I don't know the guy, but I think he recognises that he's playing with greatness and he's happy to be outside of him. I think that's a huge part as well, because I think France are such a better team with Ntamack at 10.
Yeah, well, if they retain 46% of those grubbers on Saturday, we're in trouble. That's a high number. We're dancing around Dupont, so let's get stuck into him for a moment. You have, I guess, some thoughts on how Ireland have to think about defending against him. in particular around the ruck, where he starts so much of what they do. What do you want Ireland to do, or what can Ireland do to try and shut down Dupont?
Yeah, and like to start off, look, he didn't have his best game against England. We all know that, and people are kind of focusing on that. Is he the best player in the world? That debate will roll on.
Is that a debate?
I think he is.
Who's debating he's not?
I think it's the greatest of all time. I think everyone would agree he's probably the best in the world.
Yeah.
It's the greatest of all time tends to rile certain supporters up.
Oh, really? Who?
Yeah, I think a lot of South African, supporters believe that Dupont is overhyped. And look, not to go down the rabbit hole of is he the greatest player of all time, because I think that's so hard to measure when you think of how the game has changed. But I think right now, pound for pound, he surely is, isn't he?
Who do the South Africans think is?
Probably one of their own. Peter Steph Dutoy, I would say. Etzebeth, they think that they're probably more influential on the game. He didn't deliver at the World Cup. He obviously had that injury early on, which clearly hampered him. So, it's one of those kind of dark holes, social media dark holes, Joe, that you want to steer clear of.
Yeah, I don't think it's a debate. It's Dupont.
Yeah, but like the perception is, is he playing at his best off the back of the England game? I think that's kind of clouded people's judgment. But like the stats speak for themselves. Now, look, it's only 3 games, so that needs to be taken with a pinch of salt.
And I think some of the French stats, all the French stats, I think we should emphasise are they have to be put into context. Wales on the floor in Paris and the Italy game. Meters made, post-contact meters, all of these stats are big as a result of that.
No, it is. And like you could say, oh, well, we've both played Wales, and that's that's a good yardstick, but it was a very different game. And obviously different coach but like the stats speak for themselves. So he's had 41 carries, more than double any other 9. He's beaten 12 defenders, the 4th most of any player. He's had 9 offloads, the most of any player. He's had 4 passes for line breaks, again the most of any player. He's had 6 try assists, the most of any player. He's made 224 meters gained, which is the 9th best. But like you're competing against back rows here, who are on the ball, so much, and he's the highest kick meters of any player. Now, look, we know he's a threat, but it is also an opportunity for Ireland. Like he's a scrum half who carries the ball on average 14 times in a game. Like that is so much higher than the average. Like the average might be 2, 3, or 4. And if Ireland can get up in his face and get him on the ground, he does not like being on the ground. All good offloading players do not like being on the ground, because when you do get tackled to the ground, that's where the hard work happens. You got to wrestle, you got to get the ball free, you've bodies coming in, piling over you. And for him, he wants to be involved in every phase. So
I think with him, there's a psychological boost. Even like the crowd, home advantage, it's like sacking the quarterback.
Absolutely, yeah. It literally will be that. And the excitement of the Irish crowd going to watch Dupont. We know it's a treat to see this guy in the flesh, you know. But I think, look, how can you get at him? And look, the traditional defensive system, that the first defender either side of the ruck, typically called 10 or pillar, when 9 runs or scoots from the back of the ruck, your role is actually to let him go outside you. Because if you were to chase him and he left an inside ball, who's going to pick up that?
Yes, that's how I'd understand it as well. The first defender beside the ruck is not a hero.
Correct.
You're not running this way, but I'm not going to get in your face.
No, and your role as well as that first defender, if the ball goes the opposite direction, you have to go behind the ruck and then fill in the space on the off chance that an inside ball was played by the ruck. Okay. Ireland do that particularly well. So with that, that's the conventional way of doing it. To stop someone like Dupont, you want to think outside the box. Okay, so a system that I have seen used at times to target a really high quality 9 is using a plug or a person in behind the ruck. Okay, so that means that your first defender beside the ruck, once 9 picks up that ball, can launch forward. And then if an inside ball comes from the 9, the plug can pick it up.
Okay, so that is akin to a sweeper behind the ruck.
Exactly that.
Release your first, go make his life hell.
Yeah.
And I'm behind you.
Yeah. And I think when you're playing against a quality player, keep changing the picture. You don't have to do the same thing over and over again. That's what they want.
He'll work it out.
He will figure it out. Now, the negatives with that system is it does affect your flow around the ruck. So, first off, who is nominating themselves to do that? If someone nominates that early and we need someone in the wider channels and they've parked up and gone on the plug, that can leave you short elsewhere.
So you're narrow
and
somewhere.
it also players are trying to get in position by running behind the back of the ruck. If someone's there blocking it, look, we're talking split seconds here, but against this team, that's going to matter.
Have Ireland ever used that kind of a system?
Joe Schmidt would have used it. I was trying to think back during the week. I think when we played Faf de Klerk and he was at the top of his game, Joe employed a certain system. Now, he only wanted to use it at certain parts of the field. You know, Joe was very strategic like that. He wouldn't want to show his hand completely.
I know Dupont delivered one of the great performances in last season's Champions Cup final, but generally speaking, and you don't want to tempt fate, Ireland have handled him pretty well.
He's definitely due an all-time performance against Ireland. I mean, if anyone has ever been due a performance.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it, and such fascinating analysis from Ian, comes back to the breakdown and how the referee, like what he's going to allow happen at that. Angus Gardner is the referee this weekend.
What does he have
like this?
For?
Well, usually Southern Hemisphere FCs from Australia want the game to flow, but it was interesting to hear Galthie's comments in his press conference today, where not so subtly putting pressure on the referee to basically allow France to play the game that they want to play. So clearly France think that Ireland are going to come and try and stifle their ball, and part of me thinks that that's almost like a cliched version of Ireland from the past, because I think Ireland are going to want to play ball here too. Obviously, they're going to want to stop France at source, and that comes down to the set piece and the breakdown. And those first few rucks, that first scrum, as we saw in Cardiff when Thomas Clarkson was pinged, is going to set the tone for what's to come. So if Angus Gardner arrives at the Viva Stadium and decides that he's going to allow the breakdown to be a free-for-all, then it's going to be fascinating to see how Dupont, I think, handles that. Because as much, like I said, as Ireland want to slow him down, they want clean ball to play off as well. This Ireland team aren't like the teams of the past, up the jumper kind of stuff.
It's funny when you said what Galthie said there. Just in my head, I don't know how, maybe it's a slightly outdated sense of France, but under Galthie, there have been times where they have been, for me, the most ferocious counter-rucking team on the planet. Like, vicious.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if Gardner's allowing a free-for-all there and they come ready to go counter-rucking style, they will cause a lot of trouble.
Yeah, but we are particularly good at it as well. It's going to be like a Royal Rumble at the break.
Especially if Gardner allows it to be a free-for-all, which could well happen.
La Rochelle Leinster was great at the break.
Yeah, the likes of John McCarthy coming off the top ropes. Like, that's what it's going to be like. And
there's no way to predict, like, that's just hard to predict who will come out on top. That's going to be just fascinating.
Like Caelan Murley spoke about it after the England game, and he just said Ireland are ferocious at the breakdown.
Right.
You have to fight for every crumb there. We did it against Scotland. You know, we just did not let Scotland breathe. So it's been a clear tactic of Leinster as well. You know, that came in, I thought, at the start of last year, and they've stuck with it. It's a big pillar of their game. Not only slowing the ball down, trying to get turnovers, but to do that, you have to be right on the line with giving away penalties.
And when you watch them, are they generally pretty good in terms of staying on the right side of referee for breakdown?
Yeah, no, they are, and like it ties into fitness as well. Like making a tackle, getting up onto your feet and counter-rucking is absolutely exhausting, and it leaves you gassed for 10, 15 seconds afterwards. To do that multiple times, you need to be seriously fit.
Yeah.
The likes of Josh van der Fleer, McCarthy, Doris are particularly good at it, and like they're making a tackle, getting up, knowing that they're not going to turn it over or be a successful counter ruck, but it's just making an absolute mess of the opposition's ball. There's legs and stuff coming in as the 9 is looking to pick it up. It affects the timing of the runners onto the ball. And then there is obviously times when the counter ruck is effective and your teammates pile in behind you. That is such an energizer for your team.
Yeah. Okay, well then, to finish on, we've done a lot of how France are going to hurt Ireland and how Ireland are going to withstand it. Just to round that off for a moment, and then we'll talk about how Ireland win the game. Ireland, it's hard not to notice, have an 85% tackle success rate. They've missed 91 tackles. Is this a concern, or are these kind of the Gary Ringrose style tackles where it's a missed tackle, but I've actually shut off your attack brilliantly and sent you back inside? Is this a bit of a worry?
I'm not overly concerned about it, to be honest.
Okay.
I think that's one that, look, it's been spoken a lot about this week. I don't think it's an issue for Ireland. Like, I've dove into those stats, tried to look at where they've come from. Like, a lot of them actually came at the end of the Scotland game. Ireland have won the game at that point. A good chunk of them came in the 20 minutes during the red card. And look, England had their purple patch and obviously scored those late tries. I'm confident that Ireland can shore up there.
Okay. How are you feeling about our scrum?
I'd be feeling a lot better if Tyg Furlong was starting and if Ronan Kelleher was on the bench, if I'm being honest. We were chatting to John Fogarty, the Ireland scrum coach, earlier this week, and obviously he was saying, look, that they've no concerns, but if you concede four first half scrum penalties against a Welsh side, look, I know Nicky Smith had a really good game, Will Griff-John did as well, but that's not a formidable scrum, if we're being totally honest. It's not on the same level as France. Now, I know it was Thomas Clarkson's first Six Nations start that was a big factor in it, but Andrew Porter was pinged twice as well as Clarkson being pinged twice. So I think they were meeting with the referee today, as they usually would. Both teams get to send in clips on a Thursday, I believe it is, to allow for, I suppose, understand what the referee is looking for, because one of the most frustrating things about rugby is that referees on a weekly basis just see things differently. Like on another day in Cardiff, Ireland don't concede those 4 scrum penalties. So, but
it wasn't that in Cardiff, oh my God, they were demolished. It was just gotten the wrong side.
I think Wales, listening to what John Fogarty was saying, listening to what Dan Sheehan was saying after the match, there were a lot of dark arts, I think, going on in terms of Wales trying to stop Ireland at source. And look, that is a massive part of the game. You have to tip your cap to them. But Ireland generally want to scrum aggressively, I would say, and that's sometimes part of Andrew Porter's issue, is that he just wants to get after his opposite number. But whatever feedback they got after the Wales game, and whatever feedback they got off Angus Gardner today is going to be really, really important, because I just don't think you can concede 4 first half scrum penalties to a team like France. But my concern, Joe, my biggest concern about the scrum would be that if any of the starting front row, particularly Andrew Porter, get injured early on, the replacement bench is Rob Herring, Cian Healy and Thomas Clarkson, and I think if any of those guys had to come on early, I think Ireland could be in a bit of trouble. That's my big concern. Look, I know Rob Herring is a really reliable set piece operator. You obviously would have played with him, Mads, but I kind of thought that Ireland had gone down the Gus McCarthy route now, who I think has been really impressive, I have to say. I know he's still only 21, but I've been really impressed with him. Kelleher is a massive loss. I think he had been one of Ireland's best players in the opening games of the 2 Six Nations. I think no surprise that maybe a fire was lit under him with Dan Sheehan coming back. Cian Healy was always going to be involved this weekend, obviously hugely emotional occasion for him, but I think there have been signs early on that he's been a little bit caught in, we'll say, in open field play. I think at scrum time you'd imagine he'd still be fine. And then Clarkson obviously had that tough experience in Cardiff. So I would imagine you're going to see Andrew Porter, Dan Sheehan and Fionlea Bealham possibly playing 70 plus minutes at the weekend, which to me is a big concern when France have gone with a 7-1 split. I think I'm right in saying, rolled 5 if not 6 of those forwards off at the same time against Italy around the 48th minute, and I think everything they did in that Italy game in terms of going with the 7-1 split, how they used it was clearly with Ireland in mind. So come that 50-minute mark, you're going to see an almost entirely new pack. And if, like you mentioned it, Mads, it comes down to the fitness levels, I think, of the Irish team. It's going to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, striking. The halftime footage in Rome was Galthie and not talking to the team, he was talking to the subs.
There you go.
Well,
I think our scrum is going to hold up okay.
Right.
Like I think James Tracey actually explained it really well on Off the Ball, and he was explaining what the Welsh hooker was doing. He was like a missile going down. Clarkson, look, he doesn't have the most experience. Maybe wasn't able to adjust as quickly as he should have, but he's actually scrummed really well throughout the year. Cian Healy's proven, and Rob Herring, obviously from playing with him. Look, I'm no scrum expert, but he scrummaging is a real strength of Rob's, and I think that's part of the reason why he's maybe got in ahead of Gus. Gus is still developing physically. He's not as big and strong as Rob, but I think the scrum is just going to be parity.
Okay,
and it's not going to decide the game,
which we'll take.
Yeah.
What's interesting about the line out is obviously the percentages. I mean, it's dramatic. It's like Ireland have the worst line out in the championship. You're like, what? But it's like 42 of 48.
Yeah.
And France is the best. I think they've all but won. I suppose what's maybe more telling, and we touched on it with Eddie, is that the majority of Ireland's throws are going to the front, whereas France are hitting the tail of the line out routinely. It shows a certain confidence and aggression, and it's a better attacking platform. So you would have a great sense, obviously, as a 10, as to the difference, but just past halfway, a great attacking platform, the difference between it being chucked to the front of the line out or going to the tail. That is a huge difference for you as a 10.
No, it is a huge difference, and that's when you dive into it and you go, right, Ireland's success is 88%, but 2/3 of those have been at the front. France's success is 97%, only 50 or 54% at the front. That does make a difference. And I was kind of trying to think, like, when I was playing out half, like what ball at the front would do to me attacking wise. But an important point with that is we have Gibson Park, who's the best passer of the ball in the competition, fastest and longest pass. So by winning the ball at the front, he does help with the impacts that have.
Yeah,
the ball is going through the air.
You can offset it a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the negatives are, as opposed to having one tail gunner off the back of the line out, if the ball's one at the front, you're going to have two.
As in two lads break off the line out and run.
Correct. An extra two defenders. Or sorry, an extra one defender.
Tail gunner. Do you ever sit around in a dressing room and go, we talk a lot of shit, don't we?
Yeah, but it kind of sounds mean, and it is. If you're an out half there, you know that.
Get the tail gunner, jackal him, pillar. It's like Power Rangers or something.
Exactly, it feels like it when you're out there and you've got those guys running at you.
Okay, so you go front, they've two tail gunners coming at you.
Yeah, so obviously the ball has to travel a further distance to the first the catcher, whether it's the 12 or the 10, whoever it might be. So the tail gunners are going to eat up more ground. The defenders who are 10 metres back from the line out are going to eat up more ground, and your wide defenders, and as we've seen Gary Ringrose do it particularly well, to get up high and just shut the ball going to the width, that's not too hard to do when ball is one off the front.
If you're Prendergast, your world has just closed right in.
Yeah, and you kind of have to go to the middle then, and then because it's much harder to get over the gain line because the defensive team are eating up that space. That tackle and that ruck becomes a real arm wrestle. So that second phase ruck ball is then slower. And if it's slow from the middle of the field, to go same way and keep the gain line is near impossible with the game is now. So your options are then to go early or to come back the short side. Okay. And France know that. So, I think we're going to have to be creative, but at the same time, you just want ball in play. And
they've obviously decided, you know what, rather than have a line out that's a mess, let's just secure ball and we'll go from there.
And Pete is particularly good at getting up in the air quickly. He can nearly guarantee winning ball at the front.
Okay.
As the pressure comes on, relying on that is a lovely thing to have as an out half.
And would you presume the French would be like, look, these chumps are going to the front every time. Let's really load up the front here and make their life miserable, because no one's competed overly with Ireland at the breakdown this championship thus far, which is a blessing.
Yeah, it is a funny one, and that's where it's a bit of a kind of game of chess or cat and mouse. Teams are often happy to see the opposition win the ball at the front, and they have a clear plan. If they win it there, we're going to absolutely slam them, and the quality of their ball is dreadful.
Okay.
But if you do decide to compete at the front, then it's going to open up 4 and 6, and with some smart movement, you should be able to win ball at one of those, and teams don't want that.
Okay.
I think one thing to watch out for is Ireland have on a couple of occasions thrown over the top, not even to the tail.
Yeah.
And they're definitely planning something.
Henshaw nearly got...
Yeah, you think back to the try that Keith Earl scored in the 2021 Six Nations against England. Yeah. Ireland were definitely running a variation of that against Scotland. Dan Sheehan threw the ball over the top of Robbie Henshaw. You can see James Lowe is loaded in the back to try and attack that seam. They did it against Scotland as well. Leinster did it 3, if not 4 times against the Stormers on Dan Sheehan's first game back. And Leinster did it last weekend as well in their URC game when Jack Boyle scored a try in the corner off the back of it. So while Ireland's line-out issues, I think they're still trying to figure certain things out, I would be keeping a very close eye on what they have planned for when they want to throw the ball over the back. Whether they do it this weekend, I'm not sure, but France, if I've picked up on it, you can be sure the France analysis have as well. And I think even if there's an element of doubt in France's mind, I think that's no harm at all, because I think the idea of throwing it 1 or 2 over the top of the line is to keep the defence guessing, obviously. And that try, like I said, Keith Earl's try in 2021 was such a peach. And Ireland tend to do this over the years, and Ian, you would definitely know it from Joe Schmidt's time, that they run a move and it works and it goes into cold storage and then it comes back out a few years later and it has a couple of wrinkles to it. And that's part of what makes this Ireland team great. And I think that's part of what Andy Farrell has picked up from Joe Schmidt as well. So it's one to watch out for. They're definitely something cooking. There's something cooking, exactly. Yeah.
One other point you wanted to touch on, and it's obviously a massive one, is how Ireland attack now. I'll be honest, you were the first person I heard identify the fact they're going through fewer phases and they're kicking more. It's now apparent to everybody. They're down 12% in possession on last year's Six Nations, 3 games in, which is a big fall. And they're kicking the ball 40% more.
Yeah.
We approve of this broadly. We think this, even though like instinctively, I'm like, no, possession, fancy moves, play, that's what we want. But most people, it seems, like the direction of travel.
Yeah, and look, both teams are actually doing that. Like, you think back to that game in 2023, it set a record for ball and play in the Six Nations. It was 46 minutes, which is astronomically high. The average for the games this year for both teams has been 37 and 38 minutes. So both teams do not want the slugfest that we saw in 2023.
Well, it's interesting. Galthie was fuming after that game 2 years ago. It's forgotten. The team, this is such a French thing, they went off script.
Yeah.
The plan was not to keep the ball in play.
Yeah.
They just couldn't help themselves.
The occasion got the better of them.
Yeah. So their coach is like, all week we've been talking about this.
And do you remember Edwards in the Netflix documentary? Like, bouteille le ballon.
Oh, yeah,
like,
yeah.
You know, it's not...
They were also fuming about James Lowe's try, and Galthie brought that up again today in terms of like having the correct replays on hand, because they were not happy with that. So they haven't forgotten.
To be fair, French directors are so good at this.
Yeah,
it's only fair we
even in
reciprocate.
glass houses, right?
Yeah.
But no, France completely gassed out that. The last 20 minutes, they fell off a cliff. And you think back to Ringrose's try. Like, that is fitness, you know, and like, he can stick it out for 80 minutes and keep going after that. But yeah, look, for Ireland's attack, you know, it's more impactful, it's more explosive. They're better timing at the ball, better decision making. The big difference,
because they're less tired.
It is because they're less tired. Yeah, it's like a clear. I haven't quite figured out if it's like 5, 6, 7 phases, or is it like nearly time bound where they're going, we'll attack for 30 seconds, 40 seconds. But after that, we know that we're getting into the danger zone there.
Because I remember Bernard Jackman doing a piece World Cup time, and with France, it was a set number of phases.
Okay.
And they kicked.
Yeah.
And France have a South African kicking coach called Vlak Sillier, who'd be highly, highly renowned. And obviously he comes from South Africa, and that would be part of their DNA as well. So he is a massively influential figure behind the scenes as well.
But yeah, like, again, I don't want to keep bringing up the World Cup game, but this, like, 15, 20, 25 phases, you know, Johnny's style of attack, and it wasn't just him leading it, but the game plan at the time was very heavy on the gas, heavy on energy usage. And like, that quarterfinal, we had our foot on the gas for the entire 80 minutes, and you could see the exhaustion on the players at the end of the game. Prendergast is managing, and the game plan, obviously led by him, is managing energy better. So when it gets to 5, 6, 7 phases and it's not progressing the way he wants it to, he'll put his foot on the ball and either kick the ball off the pitch, contestable, get a breather into the team, and they go again.
And would you say, if someone was to say to you, is the Irish attack good?
Yeah, I think the key now is big explosive carries.
Because it feels, it feels less slick, like less like, oh, that's a lovely little bit of backline play.
Yeah,
that intricacy isn't quite there. It feels
think
like
about the quality of tries they scored against England, though. I'm thinking of Dan Sheehan putting Jack Conan through that hole. You think of the James Lowe when he went through that, like, off a set piece move as well. So I still think Ireland's attack is firing. And it's probably something that I didn't give enough leeway for in November, when they were, you know, they definitely weren't at their best then. But Andrew Goodman has come in as backs coach. Now, when Andy Farrell is there, he's the one who runs the attack. But now that Farrell isn't there, Goodman is essentially running the attack. And that was obviously going to take time to bed in as well. You've Johnny there as a de facto kicking coach now as well. And I think his influence has been quite clear, would you think, Ian, over the first 3 games. And it's not just that Ireland are kicking more. I think it's the variation in the type of kicks. Like, Gibson Park's kicking has just been exceptional, and he was speaking to us ahead of the Wales game, saying that he couldn't kick snow off a rope when he first arrived in Ireland, because it's just not what they did in Super Rugby. Wow, so you look at the development of that. Like, obviously the obvious one is the James Lowe try in Cardiff, but he had a couple of box kicks. Think back to the box kick in Murrayfield as well, where he spotted the space in behind. Hugo Keenan catches it, and I think Jack Conan ends up scoring the bonus point try as well. So it's not that Ireland are kicking 40% more. I think it's how they're kicking and varying it.
Yeah, and on that point, like, if you're a team that just kicks off 9, as we've seen England do, it's very easy to defend that team. You can, you know, you don't even need to worry about filling the field. You can nearly be more concentrated on chasing back. What's interesting about Ireland is, like, Prendergast has actually kicked the ball more than Gibson Park. That's unusual now in the modern world of box kicking rugby. But what that does to the opposition's defence is, Ireland can move the ball very quickly, 2 passes, and then put a kick in. How the opposition have to mark up the backfield there changes the picture big time. And it also, we've seen Ireland, run from deep more this year. It's exiting from your own 22. It's the best place to attack from, because the opposition have to cover the backfield, as opposed to attacking against 14 defenders. You might only be attacking against 11 or 12 defenders.
Yeah. What was he said? We were watching the Italy-France game. You and Matt were talking. Did you say best place to attack from, hardest place to attack from, or?
Best place to attack from is your own 22. Yeah. Because you're attacking against 30. The least amount of numbers. But the risk reward is at its greatest. If you make a mistake there, and players do get cagey, like they know that if I drop a ball here, it could result in a quick 7 points.
So you've both given us loads to think about. Let's get down to brass tacks here and who's going to win. You reserve the right to change your mind, but the last time we spoke, you tipped France. My memory of that conversation is speed and power. Yeah. Their sheer athleticism here, allied to Dupont pulling strings, is a heady cocktail. Is that still where your head's at? Yeah, and look, I think we focus a lot on Ireland's flaws today, but there's big opportunities there. And Barassi at 13 for France is a real vulnerability for them. He's made some really poor decisions defensively. Right. You think when the pressure's on, maximum pressure at the end of the England game, he bites in when he doesn't need to. The connection between himself and Biel Barry was not there. Brex and Menoncello are good centres, but they carved him up. And it wasn't that it was a particularly good play. Like, when I've reviewed that and you go into it in detail, the deception at the line wasn't particularly there. Okay. He technique wise, he's as we would say, he's sat on the toilet seat. He hasn't kept his feet moving, and his decision process for me just isn't there. So a big focus for Ireland has to be getting the ball into that 13 channel with deception, and having maybe 2-3 options at the line where he has to make the right defensive read. Right. This guy's going to get it wrong. Okay. So if Ireland can get it 5-6 times in a game, that could be 2 line breaks. They're pretty good at targeting that stuff, Ireland. Very good. Yeah. And that's where, Prendergast, speed of pass, Gibson Park, speed of pass, the ball can get into that 13 channel sharpish. And then we can get deception at the line there. And as Cian touched on, the Irish attack, we've mixed the backs and the forwards nicely a few times this year, particularly against England. And that's where we can slip guys through, and we are devastating when we get in behind. So you're right, we have touched on the flaws and the awesomeness of France. Yeah. That's a good thing to mention. Anything else you want to mention before you ultimately tip France? No, look, this is going to be an amazing game. It's going to come down to some big moments. I think for us, it's like trying to tee it up so people can see, oh, that's an interesting tactic, and there's the Gruber kick, or whatever it might be. But I'm sitting beside someone in the pub on Saturday, he's like, "There's the plug." I don't know if the plug will come out. I don't know. Yeah. But look, for the speed and power that France have, and Dupont, Ntamack, Penno back, and some of the injuries that we're shipping. Look, it hasn't been enough to change my mind, and I hope Ireland win. On the balance, I think France will win. So there's no, when it gets really down to it, that size and that power at a certain point in rugby, that's just hard. Yeah, and to deal with. It's just hard. I was talking to some of my buddies about it during the week, and they were like, slagging me, saying, "Oh, you're not back in Ireland." And I'm like, well, look, there's also like the philosophies I have on how I think the game should be played, and what I think makes a big difference and what I don't think makes a difference. And on the balance of things, I think France have the edge on us. And if it doesn't turn out that way, I'll probably be questioning those philosophies after the game. Mm-hmm. Where are you?
Similar boat, I have to admit. But I do think Ireland are very smart, like you said, Joe, at picking out those weaknesses. And it was interesting, Gaël Fickou is back fit this week, and France, it almost goes back to our initial point about picking the 7-1. Galthie has just doubled down on what he obviously believes is right, but I think a lot of French supporters would feel a lot more comfortable if Gaël Fickou, who has been their defensive linchpin, he's Sean Edwards' man.
Ringrose and Fickou. The two defensive linchpins both out. But
I already mentioned that line-out play. I think back to the 2023 game and the Hugo Keenan try that Ireland scored off the goal line dropout when Finlay Beelam's beautiful hands put him through a gap. Now, Ireland have ran several variations of that goal line dropout, but when Caelan Doris is on the pitch, it allows you to do that because of the way he carries the ball back. So I'm expecting them to have something up their sleeve. I think that is Andrew Goodman's super strength, is coming up with really clever plays. I think back to the Champions Cup final in Dublin against La Rochelle when he had a couple of beauties that split them open too. So, but all that said, I still think France are slight favourites, because I think the Irish front row, like I mentioned, are going to have to play 65, 70 minutes, and I think that will eventually wear them down when France are rolling off their big guns. But look, I think it's as close to a scratch game as you can get, really, isn't it? And home advantage, could tip it in Ireland's favour. I think it's worth mentioning, I touched on it with Cian Healy, but it's Conor Murray and Peter O'Mahony's last home game as well. You would hope that Ireland get that emotional pitch right. There's talks that we're talking obviously on Thursday afternoon that there's going to be a special presentation at the team hotel tonight. We might find out more about that tomorrow, but you would hope that they're not, overly emotional. And to be fair, Andy Farrell has always gotten that right over the last few years. Finlay Bealham is winning his 50th cap. Caelan Doris is winning his 50th cap. Jack Conan is winning his 50th cap. So there's lots of emotional elements to this, but you just hope that someone doesn't do something silly early on and gets a 20-minute red card, because getting that pitch right is going to be really important.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what extent they decide to send the three boys out together first and get that 2:15 p.m. crowd a little bit more.
Well, that was the whole idea of announcing it last week, because look, this game didn't need any selling, but I think you would hope that the crowd are probably in a little bit earlier. To me, it's mad that this game is on at 2:15. I have to admit,
they've got that complete.
I can't believe it's not the 4:45.
The game of the Six Nations, and it needed to be the later kickoff, one of the two later ones. This deserves the atmosphere of an evening kickoff.
It's hard to see the logic, isn't it?
I don't get it, obviously.
I presume it came down to TV. I don't know, did France have a say in it, but you would have thought the evening would have suited them
prime time
better. Yeah,
you always get a bigger audience the 4:45 game.
Yeah, but I hope next week we're not sitting here talking about the Aviva atmosphere was flat. There's no reason for it to be flat this weekend with all those elements I put into the mix. And also, you're watching two of the world's best teams. We're watching Antoine Dupont, and like you said, Ian, anytime you get to watch this guy in the flesh is to be enjoyed. Hopefully not too much from an Irish context, but this is, like, as rugby supporters, like, this is what it's all about. It doesn't get much better than this.
So it's a final. Mm-hmm. It's just so good. So France,
I think so. Just
right. It's like a grim way to end a brilliant hour.
Are you going to Ireland?
I don't know.
Well, none of us know, but we still have to put our necks in the...
Yeah. If it was in France, I'd have no qualms about saying France. Like, none.
And Ireland are hard to beat at home.
That's what I mean. Yeah. I do think France are the more talented, better...
10, 11 in a row at home.
They're the better team.
Well, the All Blacks, obviously...
Sorry,
in the Six Nations.
Yeah, like that.
And France did beat the All Blacks in November as well, which is worth remembering.
Yeah, in France, no question France. At home, Ireland are stubborn. Oh, I'd probably go into my head say that's always time for her anyway.
I knew that was going.
Ian Madigan, thank you very much. We'll see you when we see you again. The New Zealand game in November. And Cian Tracey of the Irish Independent, thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
That's us done.
Cheers, Joe.